Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, the talk with Brother Elijah. Thank you so much for being my guest today, and then I hope you are well. We're going to be touching today on the issue of the Canon of the New Testament, the Canon of the New Testament, or the canonization of the New Testament. So, what is the Canon, or what do we mean when we refer to the Canon of the New Testament? When you talk about the New Testament, we're referring to the books of the New Testament as we have them today. And then when you talk of the canon of the New Testament, we've got some notes here whereby we're going to be going through what do we mean by the canon of the New Testament. So what we know is that the New Testament section of the Bible, we've got 27 books which form part of the New Testament section of the Bible. We've got 27 books which forms part of the New Testament section of the Bible. And then in those 27 books, the New Testament can be divided into three. We've got transitional letters. When you talk of the transitional letters, we're referring to the Gospels, which is the book of Matthew, the book of Mark, the book of Luke, and the book of John. Those are called transitional letters. And then from Acts until 3rd John, those are called epistles. So an epistle is the same as a letter. An epistle is the same as a letter. And then the last book, which is the book of Revelation, we refer to the book as Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a form of a prophetic literature of the Jewish times. It's a prophetic literature of the Jewish times whereby the message was being told through symbols and images. So that is the last book. We refer to it as Apocalypse. We can refer to it as the book of Revelation. But in classification, the New Testament, we refer to that book as an apocalypse. So we've got three classification of the New Testament canon, which is the transitional letters, which is the Gospels, we've got the epistles, and we've got the apocalypse. So what is the difference between these three? The Gospels, they talked about, those are eyewitnesses. The Gospels are eyewitnesses. There are people who wrote about the life of Jesus from eyewitnesses, from word of mouth, what they have heard, what they have seen about Jesus Christ, his life of ministry. So those are eyewitnesses. They were giving account of Jesus' life and ministry, what they saw Jesus doing, what Jesus was teaching, what Jesus was saying. So they sat down to write those kind of books. So those are transitional letters. So why do we call them transitional letters? We call them transitional letters because they transition us from the Old Testament into the New Testament. They are not basically the New Testament per se, but they are transitional letters. They are in between the Old and the New. But we classify them as the New Testament. The Canon classified them as the New Testament, but they are between the Old and the New. They are transitional letters because they give account of the life of Jesus. And we know that when Jesus Christ was still here on earth, the New Testament was not yet birth. The New Testament came after Jesus Christ, his death on the cross. Then he ushered us into the New Testament. So they are transitional letters because they transition us from the Old Testament into the New Testament. But we classify them as as part of the New Testament books, which are 27 books of the New Testament. Then when we talk of the epistles, epistle is a letter. So in the epistles, what do we see normally? We see the formation of a letter. Somebody writing a letter to the church. Somebody writing a letter to believers. So those are letters because the structure is an introduction, there is a body, there is a conclusion. It's a letter whereby James wrote a letter to the church, Peter wrote a letter to the church, John wrote the letter to the church that was there. Those are epistles. So an epistle is the same as a letter. So now when you go to the Apocalypse is the book of Revelation. So the book of Revelation is an apocalypse. So when you talk of an apocalypse, we talk of the Jewish literature. The Jewish literature by then there was a form of literature that was circulating around the Jewish writings. So in that literature of the Jewish writings, there was formulation of biblical message that were written to people, and then there was it was written in terms of symbols, images. You can see codes in the book of Revelation. There's a lot of symbols, a lot of images in the book of Revelation. So that is what we call as an apocalypse, the writing that is saturated by images and symbols. So John, which is the esteemed writer of the book of Revelation, so he used the same writing of the Jewish style, which is an apocalypse, whereby like his message was narrated through images, through symbols, and that. So that is the apocalypse. We refer to that as apocalypse. So, but one thing that you should note about the book of Revelation is that it is unlike transitional letters. We can see that these are transitional letters. It's a letter, but we call them the transitional letters. We refer to them as the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, and we've got the epistles, and then we've got the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation, it has 3 genres in it. It is a prophecy, which is a genre, and it is a apocalypse, and it's also a letter. Meaning that in the book of Revelation, you see 3 genres. In the epistles, there is 1 genre, which is a letter, and then in the Gospels, you probably see a genre of a letter, and then in Revelation, we see 3 genres there. We see a letter, we see a prophecy, we see an apocalypse. So that is the nature of the book of Revelation. So what we mean by a canon? A canon it simply means a measuring stick. A measuring stick. A canon means what? A measuring stick. So what we mean by a canon of the New Testament, we are simply saying that the New Testament was compiled. There were a lot of books, basically, that were circulating in the early church. So now they had to decide, okay, which books should we adopt as part of the New Testament? Which books should we see them as authoritative as part of the New Testament canon? So in talk of canon, we talk about the authoritative books of the New Testament. A canon means a measuring stick, meaning that these books were measured to be part of the New Testament canon. So canon means what? A measuring stick. So New Testament canon, we're referring to authoritative books of the New Testament, because why? There are some books that were circulating, the gospel, the books that were circulating in the church, which claimed to have the same position as these other books that we have. So they were measured, these books, to see which one are fit to be part of the New Testament and which ones are not fit to be part of the New Testament. So that is what we mean by the canon of the New Testament. So in our next session, I'll be discussing how were the books collected to become part of the canon. What was the scale? Since the canon means a measuring stick, the books that we have in the New Testament, there were a lot of books that were circulating. But now the church fathers in different church councils, they had to decide, okay, since we have these so many books which are claiming authority to be inspired by God, so let us decide, let us see these books, which one are correct to be included in the canon. That's part of the canon of the New Testament. So they sat down and they discussed, and then that is when we have the canon of the New Testament, as we have it today, as the 27 books of the New Testament. So thank you so much today. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you learned something, and then don't forget to like, comment, and share and subscribe. All is well, and Jesus Christ loves us all. Shalom Shabbat.